She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstine.
All right. Well, hi, Sue. I'm so glad to see you. It seems
Hi,
like it's
Mia.
been forever.
It does feel like it's been forever. We've been trying to do this for a while, so I'm excited to finally get to chat with you.
I know. I'm glad to visit with you also. I was trying to think of when we last saw each other, and I think it's been over a year ago.
Well, we saw each other briefly at SCI this year,
Yeah,
but
I guess we passed in the halls.
yeah, we didn't really get to talk though. It was during a meeting or something, and I had to get back to the booth, and you were busy too. So we just kind of gave a quick hug and then went on, I think.
Yeah, I think I actually took a picture at the booth where you were at because you weren't there when we actually had time and we stopped. You weren't there. And so I was like, well, here's the booth.
Every time I tried to leave, I would get a phone call, Sue, hurry up and get back here. So I didn't get to see hardly anything at SEI because every time I tried to leave, I had to keep scooting back. But that's a good thing. So
It is a good thing. And SCI seems like it's been a great benefit to you. It seems like it's been an asset that helped project the book a little bit. And so before we get going into that, for my listeners, would you just give them a brief intro of who you are?
my name is Sue Tidwell, and I'm the author of a book called Cries of the Savannah, my first book. And I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and now I live in rural Idaho.
Yeah. And so I met Sue actually via social media, and I'm always kind of griping about social media. It's like a good and bad. I don't know. But it's amazing because it has facilitated a lot of friendships for me. And I've met a lot of wonderful people that I probably would not have met otherwise. And I'm not sure how you found me, but you had reached out and I was seeing your posts and sharing your posts. And then I was like, let's meet at SCI. And it was pretty exciting to meet. And I think that was in Reno, or
Yeah,
was it Las Vegas?
it was in Vegas, I
It was
think.
in Vegas.
In Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was Vegas. It was during pandemic time. So probably the first one that we were allowed to have. And I remember you were kind of a little shy. And then I introduced you, and then boom, it's like this big thing blossomed. And it's so fun to watch where you're going.
Well, it's fun because I love talking about Africa, and I'm passionate about the subject. So I'm good once I get going, but I still get a little intimidated at times, I have to admit. So because this whole world is totally new to me, this whole the author world and the outdoor industry world and everything. But people have been so gracious and so helpful, and people like you and others, and so it's been really good.
Yeah, and that's super cool. I'm so glad that everybody has been so welcoming to you. I've seen so many things that you've been doing, but before we get into a lot of that stuff, obviously we want to talk about the book. And I have it here because it's just something that I've been actually ordering them
Yeah,
and
I
giving
see it
them
there.
as
Yeah,
gifts. And I give them to legislators that I think need some help understanding and stuff like that. So they're kind of a go-to in my satchel. I always have an extra one.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I wish I could figure out a way to get to them, get one to all the legislators, but I just haven't, I just don't have that kind of funding. But that would be awesome to get it to one to everybody like that.
Yeah. And so thinking of that and educating, I mean, basically, I looked at the book as an education because although I'm a hunter and I've been to other countries to hunt, I've never been to Africa. And a lot of people are really surprised by that. But even me as a hunter, I just loved the book and how you kind of just put us in the seat beside you and took us along an adventure while you educated us. So it was really cool. And I just am kind of curious because I'm also a writer. How did you start the book? I mean, did you journal while you were there?
I did. Luckily, the girl I went with, Sue, there's another Sue, believe it or not, in the book. But anyway, she had been to Africa before. She says, Sue, you need to write everything down because you will not remember so much happens in a day. So luckily I did take really good notes. I mean, I wrote down every time we saw animals, I wrote everything down as best I could. And then I also had Lillian, which if you read the book, you'll get to know Lillian. She was our Tanzania assigns a government game scout with every hunting party. So we got a young 23-year-old female, very smart, and she spoke pretty good English. So we became really good friends, and she helped me. Like later on, we were able to keep contact even afterwards through the internet when she wasn't on poaching patrol and stuff. So if I forgot something, I could just, the beauty of the internet, I could just send her a text and say, hey, what was the name of that river? What was this? Am I presenting this fact right? And she could answer me. And she read everything too. She read every chapter to make sure I was staying true to form, basically, and that I wasn't screwing anything up.
And that's so cool that you had that as a resource. And did she offer that while you were there, or did you kind of just become friends with her and you felt comfortable asking her for the help?
We just kind of became friends there, because when I went there, I really had no idea I was going to write a book. It's just that I went there with so many preconceptions of Africa. And because I'm like, even though I understood hunting, I'm like a lot of people, we put Africa in a different category and we put it on this pedestal. And so we don't want you hunting those animals. Well, that was me. You know, I grew up in a hunting family, but I didn't want my husband hunting a zebra and other animals. So I went over there with these misconceptions. And as I was there and get to know the people and saw the reality of life in Africa, because we were clear out in the bush with lions roaring outside at night, hippos and nearby. I mean, we were like 4 hours from the nearest village even. So sleeping in a tent with all these things going on. But I realized my whole concept changed. And as I became friends with the whole crew and with Lillian, who has no affiliation with the hunting party, by the way, she's there to oversee that. So she is not like in their back pockets or anything. And so she taught me so much. And by the end, I promised her that I would try to help other people like me understand. And that promise pretty much evolved into Cries of the Savannah. I really didn't know what I was promising at the time or what I was getting myself into, but this is what happened anyway.
Yeah. And it seems like it's been such an undertaking, and you're self-published. Is that correct?
I'll turn my silent mode on my phone. Yes, I am self-published because let's face it, I am a non-hunter woman who, I wasn't a writer or an author or anything at the time. And all of a sudden, you know, here I am, like I'm writing a book about hunting in Africa, and I've never written a book before. So needless to say, publishers weren't jumping up, you know, up and down to get a hold of my book. So yeah, I ended up self-publishing and just kind of learned as I went and figured it out and, you know, trudged. I mean, I did everything twice as hard as I had to, but that's how you learn. So anyway, I got her done.
I imagine since it's your first book and you're doing it on your own, there's a lot of stuff you learn as you go. Did you have to learn that? Like, did you research on the internet, or did you have any resources for that end of it?
I didn't have any personal resources, but YouTube was my friend. I mean, I've never been much into YouTube, but I have been during this whole author career, because anything you need to know is pretty much there. Then you just got to just decipher through which ones you want to follow and listen to and everything. But yeah, I didn't have any personal authors or people in my life to talk with. So that was really difficult for me. That's why when you introduced, you know, when I got to POMA, that was so nice, because you're all of a sudden you're talking to these other people in this world. So that was really nice.
That's cool. And hopefully you've made some good contacts there that will be helpful in the future. Do you think you might write another book?
I think I am, even though this was supposed to be the one and only, but I get so many requests for me to keep going. And even though this trip was supposed to be once in a lifetime, I have been to Africa twice since, because it just gets in your blood. I can't explain it until you're there, but it just draws you back again and again. And so I'll probably write, you know, another adventure about the next two, one in Mozambique and one in Namibia. So they won't be as long, and they'll be more hunting, but I'll still weave in a little conservation as I go. So
yeah. Is that something that you understood before you went? I mean, I know you're from a hunting family, but did you understand the capacity of how hunting is conservation and what that means before you went? Or did you really connect there?
Didn't in the way that I do now. I mean, I understood that, you know, you needed population control. We lived in Western Pennsylvania. Deer were dead all over the roads. So I understood you had population problems and only so many animals can live in a certain area. So I understood that part of it. But the deeper, all the money that hunting brings and all, you know, all the incentive it gives to protecting wildlife, that was kind of way above me. I had never really even thought of all that stuff, and it just kind of, all the pieces of the puzzle started just falling together when I was in Africa. And then, of course, because essentially, I know somebody told me you don't call yourself a nobody, but really I am like I'm a good storyteller, but I'm not a biologist. I'm not a scientist. So for me to just tell you all of a sudden, so I backed what I learned up with research. So, and the more I wanted to back it up. I don't overwhelm the book with that. I try not to anyway, but I just want people to know that this isn't just me saying it. This is biologists and scientists, non-hunting ones at that, because I tried not to use hunting sources. But you go down a rabbit hole. The more you learn, you just keep learning more and more and more, and it just takes you down all these pathways.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, when you're doing this research and you said you tried not to use hunters as the resource, I think that's brilliant. But also, did you find any resources that were contradicting a conservation model?
Yeah, I did. And I read those too. But after you read, if you go into it open-minded and you read all these things and you read the hunting, the non-hunting biologists, for instance, if you read all their data and then you read these anti-type stuff, they're always missing a piece of the puzzle. Like they want you to turn everything into photo safari areas, but they don't tell you that those areas have already been used up, anything that photo tourists want to go to. And not tourists don't want to go to a lot of the lands that are protected by hunting areas. I mean, there's always they villainize trophy hunting, but never mention that all the meat is eaten. Nothing goes to waste. So there was always a piece of when I read their side, there's always pieces of the puzzle missing, but I think it was good to get both perspectives.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm just curious because a lot of the advocacy stuff, which is why I said I keep a copy of your book with me. And when I'm doing advocacy, it's like the opposition, they always try to use whatever we have, use it against us. So I was just curious, in you doing research, I'm sure you would come up with that. So thank you for answering that question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's something that will be continual forever, I'm sure, but I do appreciate the book itself. And since you've written the book and you've met all these people, and I know that you've been doing other things, you've been all over the place. But one of the things that I was super curious about is that you went with Brittany Boddington and to her She Hunts camp. Can you tell us a little about that and your experience there?
Yeah, it was so fun. I mean, first of all, it was really fun to be a group of these women. The camaraderie there was just really fun. And even though I still have really no desire I don't want to say no desire to pull the trigger. There's a part of me that wants to go there, but I don't feel the need to, if that makes any sense. I still get to experience the hunts through my husband. I get to go track with him. I get to be in the mountains with him. I get to do all that. So I don't feel that need, but going to the She Hunts camp was great because, you're with all these women and you're learning all these skills, and we did all kinds of different shooting. I got to shoot a double barrel. I got to shoot a Cape Buffalo. It was a fake one, but with a double shotgun or whatever. See, I don't even know the right names for rifles, but, and we got to do the clay pigeons or all that stuff. See, that's terrible. I never put that world in that aspect, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed it.
It's super cool. So when you shot the Cape Buffalo, did it bring back memories? Because that was one of the stories in your book that I thought was super exciting. Did it bring back memories when you were doing those different things?
It did, but this one wasn't charging, so that was much better. I liked having it not charging at me, but it was still so exciting. It was so funny because Brittany just said, "Sue, you just lit up." She said, "I can tell." I said, "I know it was exciting, even though it was just a piece of plywood." But yeah, it did bring back memories. Just I mean. Well, then, and even being on that ranch brings up, because you're seeing all the African animals again. So in that Texas atmosphere, looks a little bit like Africa, not quite. You're missing the umbrella acacia trees, but it does take you back to that time. So that was really special.
So what would you think if somebody is planning a trip to go to Africa, either for a photo safari or for a hunting trip? What kind of planning do you have to do before you head out there?
Oh,
A ton?
a ton. And I have to say, I didn't do a lot of it. Rick is the planner and it's his hunt. So he's the one that, and he goes and talks. I would definitely recommend going to, if you're going to Africa, especially if you're going to be a hunter, and maybe even not, but I would go talk to the outfitters at SCI or Dallas Safari Club or something like that, because you can talk to them and they can show you pictures of the place and you can see if your personalities click. You can, and just be like, each time I learn more. So be clear with your questions, like what kind of camp is it going to be? What kind of animals am I going to see? Like, for instance, our second safari, we went to Namibia and I was expecting to see elephants. Well, we were in a national park, but we were in a national park that didn't have elephants, zebras, lions. So I went there. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm used to National Geographic with, all these animals. So I think you have to have your expectations and ask the right questions. And I think you have something that helps with that, doesn't it? Help people pick outfitters.
I have a guide on my website that helps when you're booking a guided hunt, and it's questions to ask when booking a guided hunt. And I had done it as a general guide for any hunt, but then also I haven't been to Africa. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to Russia. I've been to Finland. I've been to Canada, but I feel like internationally that maybe I need to just do a separate guide for that, because there are some other questions that I don't have in that book that I think people need to realize in their travels, as far as, visas and different logistics of importing your firearm and that kind of stuff.
What shots you need, like some countries you need different shots than others, and, some areas are prone to malaria, others aren't. So there is a lot more to know about Africa. And I have to say, Rick took care of most of that for me, but there are a lot of resources out there to help. But
yeah,
definitely want to research it a bit.
yeah. And so my guide is basically North America, and I'm working on the guide for international. I had it integrated at one time and I was like, it just wasn't flowy. So we've got the one for now.
Well, now you have something to work at. So.
Yeah, and more things to work on.
Yeah, just like we need another thing on our list, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so you said that you just got back from Ireland.
Yes.
Was that a hunting trip or just vacation?
No, it wasn't. For once, we decided we've always wanted to go to Ireland, and our friends, Rod and Sue, wanted us to go there. And so they agreed to not take their rifles for once. So we just toured around and we saw tons of sheep. We didn't see any deer. There's the red deer there. And I don't know if there's another one, but we went through the national park hoping we'd see them, but we didn't see any. But yeah, Ireland was awesome. We traveled around like a new bed and breakfast pretty much every night. So we hit a good part of Ireland, but it was awesome. It's beautiful. The people are wonderful. And so it was really fun. And the pubs are great.
Of course.
I kissed the Blarney Stone too, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you know, but that's supposed to give you the gift of eloquence. So I don't know if you can recognize it yet, that I have the gift of eloquence, but whatever that is, I'm not really sure exactly what that is, but I thought if I'm going to Ireland, I'm kissing that Blarney Stone. So
yeah, I was wondering what the difference was. I definitely noticed.
That must be it. You have to hang upside down. I thought kissing the Blarney Stone like was a rock in the middle of a field or something, but you have to crawl to the top of this tower, this castle, and then you have to lay on your back and hang upside down to reach this stone, and somebody has to be there to hold you. It's very scary, actually. I didn't know it was like going to be an adventure, but it turned out to be like an adventure. I was only one out of the four of us that went that would kiss the stone. So
wow. Yeah, I didn't know that either. That's something, you learn something every day. That's why we're here.
That's right.
That's why we're here, is to learn something. So not knowing that when you went in there, I mean, did you even know the Blarney Stone was going to be a thing on your tour, or?
Well, I'd always heard of the Blarney Stone, and I thought, I want to check it out. But then, of course, as we got closer to the Blarney Castle, because we were making our rounds, I started researching a little bit more, and that's when I found out what all was involved. And you had to hang upside down and lean backwards. And in the old days, they actually would, like in the medieval days, they would hold you by the foot and hang you down. but nowadays they have it rigged so you can lean back and there's a bar there. If I would have fallen, I would only fallen like a couple feet, not like 4 stories. So, you know, but anyway, yeah. So then, I love adventure and I love to be daring. And I just felt like I had to do it. So anyway.
But I love that you're just kind of a go-getter. I mean, even with the book, as I said, I just felt like we kind of got to tag along with you, which I love that when I'm in a book like that, I can be there and just go along for the ride. But you just seemed so adventurous. There were times that you were afraid or you had some fear, but you kind of like just went for it. It was like you were safe, but not. I don't know. Can you tell us about that?
I have to say, because, there were times I was really afraid, but I'm also a very trusting person. So like I had total faith in not only my husband, but the crew. I mean, it only took me a day or so and I felt like, they had my back. And even though I knew there was dangers out there, and I still knew that anything can happen in Africa at any time, I felt like I felt like I was in a cocoon, so to speak. Like they kept me protected from harm. When I'd try to do something stupid, for instance, like I had an afternoon free and I said, oh, I'm going to go read by the hippo pool because there was a group of hippos 300 yards away and they're up on the rocks. So I thought I'd be safe from the hippos, because they're one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. And they're like, Sue, we have to send an armed guy with you. You can't go to the hippo pool. I'm like, what? They said, well, that's where the animals go to drink. That's where the lions go. And I'm like, oh. So sometimes I had to be reminded. I got so comfortable sometimes that I had to be reminded that it's not Idaho. So
yeah, that's very intriguing because friends that have gone on photo safaris, they seem to have quite the opposite experience. So, and that's just the difference between a wild area and an area that's not.
yeah, we're so used to seeing National Geographic where the lions and zebras are all sitting there as you drive by and the tourists can take all these pictures. It's not like that in a wild area. It's not like that where hunters are because they're like animals hunted here. They run. So you have to sneak up on them. You have to track them and stalk them. And so and like lions, it's kind of weird. They look at you as food when you're on the ground, but apparently when you're in a vehicle, they see you as this giant elephant, mechanical elephant. That's what the PH told me. He says they see you differently when you're on the ground than when you're on a vehicle. So that's interesting. So, because I always wondered how in the parks, the lions are just going right by when the people are on the vehicle, but I get that the key is to not get off of that vehicle. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, we would even drive by in Rungwa West and the lions be sitting there and they just pay no attention to us sometimes when we just be driving by. But you think differently. We were told at night to never leave our tent. Like they built our little bathroom butt up to the tent so that we could go in there and never leave the tent because that's the most dangerous time. That's when leaving the tent at night is not a good thing. So I've heard of a few people dying that way, but anyway, so yeah, so I listened. I didn't leave my tent at night.
Like, I'm not afraid of the dark, but there's definitely things in the dark to be afraid of.
Yes, definitely. And it was scary. I mean, it's kind of funny because you're hearing the lions and the hyenas and the hippos, you're hearing all that every night. And it was terrifying. But at the same time, you found yourself just mesmerized. I mean, I just ended up looking forward to what I call the African symphony every night, because every night was a little different, like a different composition of animals and sounds. So every morning we get up and say, well, what did you hear last night? What did you hear last night? So I just fell in love with that, even though sometimes it was really terrifying, but I survived. So
I survived. Did you feel like when you were there, were you exhausted by the time you came back? Because you were there for 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I was exhausted the first few days because the jet lag and just being pummeled in that vehicle for 12, 13, 14 hours a day from sun up to sundown. And I just didn't know how I was going to survive it. But then when you start catching up, and then the excitement, you're just like, I never wanted to miss a hunt. Like I could have stayed back and relaxed in an afternoon or something and not gone with Rick, but I didn't want to miss a second. I didn't want to miss one giraffe going by or one zebra going by. So, so no, I was probably tired by the end of the trip, but I was more just, I have to say, devastated to leave. When you're with such a small group, we were with 21 Tanzanians taking care of us, representing 6 different tribes. And you become so close to those people when you're spending so much time with them. And I felt like they just adopted us into their world and shared their world with us, that saying goodbye was really hard, because you know that you're very likely never going to see those people again. And so it was really hard. I was just pretty devastated to be leaving. I fell in love with Masimba camp, and basically I'm just so attached to it. So it was hard to say goodbye.
Yeah. Do you have any plans of going back there?
I would love to, but things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot. First of all, Tanzania is really expensive now, so I don't know that we could do that again.
Yeah.
We went kind of at the perfect time, and it was supposed to be once in a lifetime, so we kind of splurged. But in other places, I don't want to scare people off from going to Africa, because there's really reasonable places. You can go to Africa for the same thing you can go as an elk hunt. So don't let that scare you off. But parts of Tanzania, depending on what you're going to hunt, can be really expensive. And it would never be the same. You can never recreate that same first experience. Like there's no guarantee that Lillian would be our game scout, and Raphael, our PH, has moved on, and Hillary ended up taking on a partner, and now he's a PH. Things really changed because of Cecil. So when Cecil, that whole affair happened, Tanzania is known for the lion and leopard hunting area. And when they put all those restrictions on lion imports, it really affected their bottom line. And to be honest, there are cheaper places to hunt. So unless you're hunting some of these major species, it is cheaper to go to some other places. So that really affected the outfitters in Tanzania. A lot of the hunting concessions are sitting empty now because of that. So and when a hunting concession sits empty, poachers move in. So right. It's really a sad situation.
Yeah, that's something. I had Tom Opry on to talk about the Africa, and he had his Shepherds of Wildlife movie and all of that, and he talked a lot about the poachers. But I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, is how hunting deters poachers, and that kind of balance that's there. Because I don't know, and maybe you can tell me differently, but I think a lot of non-hunters kind of put hunters and poachers in the same bracket, not realizing that they're entirely different. So
yeah, it's like Amy Dickman said, one's a shopper and one's a shoplifter. So, that's the difference. But yeah, I had no idea either until Lillian explained to me how important hunting was, because poachers do not want to operate when there's hunters around. With hunters come game scouts and professional hunters and all these people with guns. So they don't want to operate in those areas. And it also, aside from that, and they position, like in Tanzania, they position the hunting concessions around the national parks, like a buffer zone. So not only can the animals in the national park overflow into those areas as they outgrow themselves, capacity wise, but those act as buffer zones, because the poachers have to travel through hunting concessions to get to the national parks. So they're positioned like that purposely. I didn't have a clue about any of that. And most importantly is the hunters just make that kind of habitat valuable in its natural state, rather than being turned into farmland or crops or cattle pasture. So by making that land valuable, it's critical.
Yeah. Are there any other things you think that most Americans would not or don't understand about safaris?
Yeah, I hate that word trophy hunting, because
I do
it's
too.
so deceptive. And they have, it's okay to get a trophy in every other sport or anything else, but all of a sudden when it comes to hunting, it's this terrible thing. But all the meat in Africa gets used. And I don't understand why people get so hung up on the fact that you're going after the oldest, most mature animal who is done passing on his genes. I mean, we were always targeting old animals that were done. They were done with a breeding cycle. And so, and they might not even be what some people would call trophies by that standpoint, but they were past their breeding age. Like, for instance, Rick had a kudu in his sights, 48 inches. I mean, to us, used to elk, that looked huge. Yeah. But at the last minute, Raphael called it off because he wasn't quite old enough. So so I love that. At first you're disappointed, of course, but then you're like, that is so cool, because this is what it's about. This, he had a few years of living to do and spread his massive genes, and we had to aim for an older male. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. And watching, like, even though we were not near a village, all of our extra meat, all the meat we had and didn't eat at night, would get cut into strips and dried for them to take to their villages at a later point. So even we were 4 hours from a village, even there, nothing went to waste. And the other misconception that people really don't understand, because people get really touchy about hunting at lions and leopards, which that was one of my hangups, is if you don't put a value on them, there's no reason to protect them for the local people. They don't want to live with those animals. They don't want their kids going to school and walking to get water with lions and leopards around. So they poison them. Lillian explained to me that's the biggest way lions and leopards die, is by poison. So by putting a value on them, they will work harder to protect them, to maybe keep their cattle in boma as their fences, to do their chores in the safest time of day. There's all these things that we don't take into consideration, so that was a big learning experience for me.
Yeah. And that was surprising to me too. And I guess it's something that I knew of, but the way that you have presented it just makes total sense. And I think even the loss of some of the people from the villages that was very impactful to me. The stories of people, losing their children or different things like that. So,
well, I tried to put a human face on it, because I think sometimes the hunting world gets too caught up in statistics. And I think really when you just explain the human condition and the human story, it just makes common sense. I mean, it's just common sense. You don't even need facts and figures anymore. I mean, they're important, don't get me wrong, but that's why I've tried to put a human face on it. That's why I wanted people to get to know the people of Masimba Camp and fall in love with them like I did, and care about their future and care about their kids. And so that's what I tried to do in the book.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have done that. And I hope that a lot of the listeners will go read the book. When you did the book, who did you expect the audience to be?
I listened to you talking to Zach the other day, and it, on about his book, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'll be totally honest. I was just writing my story. I was writing my story as it happened and as I saw fit, and then I was weaving in some of the conservation as I learned it. But I was hoping to reach the non-hunters, of course, and I would have loved to reach the anti-hunters, but that might be, and I've changed some. If they read it with an open mind, I've got some good feedback, but I still get nastiness too. But somebody called me a liar the other day and said my husband was a creep, but for wanting to hunt, he was a creep and I was a liar. But they did admit that they understood hunting in a different light now in Africa. So I'm like, well, okay, he gave me a 2-star review, but I got the message across. So even though they think my husband's a creep and hunters are creeps, they understood it. So I guess it still was a win in that way. But yeah, when I wrote the book, I was trying to reach non-hunters and anti-hunters. I wanted them to understand. I wanted the people like me who understood hunting to a degree, but I wanted them to understand how important it is to Africa. I mean, I fear for Africa. If you fall in love for Africa, you fear for Africa. And I want people to understand what it means to the local people, these wildlife habitats, the animals. So, so that's who I was kind of appealed to. I'm just fortunate that hunters like the book too, because I didn't know that they would like it. But yeah, I get great feedback from hunters too. So that's been awesome.
That is awesome. I was curious about what kind of feedback you were getting from an anti-hunter, because that's something from me on the hunting side. It's been a while. I haven't really seen a lot from them, but I used to get a lot of death threats and, different things. If I'd share a picture of my dog, that my dog should die. And it's like, how, I don't understand how this fixes this.
Yeah, one person wanted to shoot me in the spine and put me in a diapers, wanted to paralyze me and put me in diapers for the rest of my life. That was one threat I got and stuff. So, that's hard to take, and especially in the beginning, because I really tried to, interact with these people, actually but it just got draining. I just realized there's some people you're just never going to reach because they're never going to listen. But I have to say, I'm really pleased that I get some great reviews from antis who admitted they were total antis, and the book has totally changed their opinion, and they give me 5-star reviews, and they have a whole new concept of hunting. So when I read reviews, because once in a while, I'll be honest, I get so burned out and tired to keep pushing. And because writing a book is it's hard work, and this whole thing the publicity thing that goes with it is hard. But then I get a review like that. I'm like, okay, I got to keep going, because it just is so thrilling when you get a review like that you changed, you made a difference in that person, and now maybe they'll stand up, because that's my ultimate goal. I want people to stand up for Africa, fight for Africa. I don't mean with fists, but if you hear somebody talking bad about trophy hunters or talking bad about it, just tell them what you've learned, or just give them another insight, so that's what I hope to do with the book anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful mission, and it's incredible that I don't know how much you're having to deal with that, but it's incredible how when you do see stuff like that, even if you know what kind of a place they're coming from, and you're like, I don't need to take this to heart. Like, these are just people who are not nice people, but it still hurts,
Still
and
hurts.
yeah.
Being called a liar was really, like I made the whole story up. It was just kind of like, gosh, I mean, that it hit me harder than that. Was just recent too, so that's why that's in my
Kind of fresh
frame of mind. But yeah, it's hard to hear that, and then, like you said, the death threats and stuff are almost easier, because you just think they're just so radical that it's, and like I said, they make no sense. Here they're trying to save animals, but they're going to kill people. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
And I think women get it worse. That's what I've heard, because I think we destroy their whole, what I'm saying? Guys can be the hunters.
They have the perception of these old rich white men that take their guns and shoot everything in sight, and that's not really how it works. But then you get a woman telling the story, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It ruins their perception and their story in their mind.
Yeah, I think so.
So
yeah, I found it interesting when your conversation the other day, because about how hard hunting is. People have no concept of how hard hunting is until they're out there doing it. I mean, you have an idea, but until you're hiking those mountains and swatting the tsetse flies and stuff, I don't think you get that. But that's a whole story, really.
Yeah, and I don't think people understand the tsetse flies. Like, I only understand them because every friend of mine that has been there has talked, like, that's the first thing, like, I hear about that all the time. So when I opened your book and started reading, I was like, oh,
they're
smacking each other, and this is good.
Like slapstick comedy routine. But yeah, they're what I called them. Well, Lillian called them angry little devils. I called them miniature vampires with wings, because they just, did not want to die, suck the blood out of you and would not die. But
fun and adventures. So through the adventure, you were not hunting, but you were kind of experiencing the work of the hunt. What do you think inspires people? I mean, Rick is your husband's name, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rick hunts, and you kind of see the work that goes in there. What do you think it is that inspires people to want to go through that much work when we really, like, a non-hunter is like, well, you could just go to the grocery store. I mean, like, you went on that adventure. What do you think about that?
I don't know, you see things in a whole different way because like I love to hike, but you see things so differently than when you're pursuing an animal because you're just reacting, you're part of the environment. And it's not really about, with hiking, it's always getting point A to point B and to see a beautiful sight and come home. But with hunting, it's the journey itself, the what's around the next bend, what's the next footprint, what's the scat on the ground. And in Africa, it's such a treat because you have these trackers that have amazing skills that are just, I could follow them all day long and I wouldn't care if I ever saw an animal. It's just mesmerizing to watch them do their thing. And then when I would see us, I'd think they'd have us on a wild goose chase, and then you'd see something, I'd be like, oh, I actually see it too, so I would get all excited. But it does give you that drive, I think. And like you said, I think it's part of our history. It's in our DNA. In some people more than others, like I enjoy just going with my husband and challenging myself that way and seeing it that way. I don't feel that need to pull the trigger at this point. But so everyone's a little different. But I just think it's part of who we are. And a lot of people are trying to deny that, and that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that part of our personalities,
Yeah. Well, it's something that I'm trying to kind of understand in a greater capacity, especially for a non-hunter, because I always try to be empathetic. And I teach hunter education. I have a hunter ed class coming up the day after tomorrow. And there inevitably will be somebody there who doesn't come from a hunting family and doesn't have that background. So it's always nice to get someone else's perspective of the view, because I was raised in a hunting family. And like you said, like, we were raised this way, so we kind of understand it. But what about somebody who wasn't? Like, how are they going to see this, and how do we explain it to them? So it's definitely, the book I thought was wonderful, and it's definitely great to get your perspective on it.
Oh, good. That's what I hope. I hope I gave it, a different perspective than the norm, basically seeing it through my eyes. That was my goal anyway. But yeah, it's just, I wish everybody that questions it would go with a hunter sometime. Just follow along and see the care and the love they have for the animals and the work and the dedication that it takes. Because I mean, it's a lot of time, dedication, skills that you have to develop. There's so much involved there, and the camaraderie between hunters. I mean, I know there's competition too sometimes, but seeing like how excited hunters get when somebody else gets an animal, or when a kid, that is so special. I love that. And I just think that's amazing. I wish people like, and as far as like the love of the animals, when we were in Mozambique, our PH would stop and pick up the spiders, the non-poisonous ones, and he would show us, and it would roll around his hand. He would tell us about the spider, and then he'd put it down. He said, now make sure you don't step on that, and then we had a spider living in our tent, which I do not like spiders. And he asked me, please do not kill it. It's a good spider. And so I had to, like, it was hiding behind the mirror. So every day I had to like make all this noise so it would go behind the mirror so I could comb my hair, brush my teeth. And then I would like, because I did, but I mean, this is a professional hunter who takes people to hunt animals for a living, but yet he has so much respect for the tiny creatures. That's what I wish people could understand about hunters and stuff in general.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And yeah, that would be kind of interesting to have. Was it a huge spider? How big was it?
It was about 1.5 inches, 2 inches big enough, I had a net, we had a mosquito net at this place. So I just kept telling myself, and he told me that the spider would stay in the bathroom. So, and me being the trusting person I am, I chose to believe him. So I thought, okay, as long as it's staying there and I put it on my head or something, And
it probably liked a little bit of the moisture that was in there. There's oftentimes like the spiders, like the water spigots outside, wherever there's a little moisture. So that was probably one of those spiders.
Yeah, and he was always eating other bugs because in the morning we'd find all these legs and stuff in the sink, what other critters he had eaten during the night. So it was
Oh
always,
gosh.
it was entertaining. But yeah, then one time we were down in a hole where we're like our PH, he's like in the hole with a flashlight, and Rick and I, like idiots, we want to see and learn everything. So we're like right in the hole looking with him. And we're like, what are we looking for? He's like, well, this is where spitting cobra, or not spitting, but one of the striped cobras, I think, hang out. And we're like, wait, Rick and I jump out. Well, we don't need to see a cobra. So it's just funny. And they move really slow this time of year. I'm like, well, I'll take your word for it, but I'm not getting that close. So that was kind of funny.
It sounds like so much fun. I was just telling Hank that we've always said that Africa's on the list, but it's kind of like when we get older. And maybe it's because I read your book. I don't know. But I told him recently, I was like, we always say when we're getting older, but we're not getting any younger. So maybe we should start planning this.
Yeah, I firmly, like Rick and I kept putting it off. Of course, we're older than you, I believe, but we kept putting it off. Never the right time, never the right money. But my brother died of cancer, and so that all of a sudden makes you think differently. You realize time is limited. So we kind of felt like this is something that we want to do. So we kind of had to make it happen. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful. But now I'm addicted to Africa. So
well, that's what I was just about to say. The addiction to Africa is partly why we've always said down the road, because I have several friends one of my girlfriends, she's been there 31 times. And she goes all over other places too, but I don't have the funds that she has. So I'm like, okay, let's do some of these other things because we won't have the money to go back there 31 times.
Yeah, it is hard. You have to, and it is hard because there's other places I want to see too. I would love to go to Australia, New Zealand, and places like that. But it's hard because I still want to keep going back to Africa. There's so much to see in Africa. I want to go to every country. And then as you get to know these people, you want to keep that relationship going. But at the same time, you also want to see a different part of the country or different part of the continent and meet new people. So it's really this struggle. I think some people go back and go with the same person all the time. And I would love that because I've loved everyone we've gone with. But at the same time, you want a new experience too. So it's hard, but it's addictive. So be prepared.
Okay. I will take that to heart. So as a woman going to Africa, was there any gear that you found and that you took on any of your trips that you think like are must-haves to pack with you?
I can't think of anything offhand because I'm a pretty low maintenance person. So being from Idaho, I'm used to just, to be blunt, squat behind a bush. So I can do that. Now, some women might want to take those little pee things. I don't know, whatever. I can't think of, because you're not worrying about makeup. You're not worrying about drying your hair. You're not worrying about any of that. There's usually no electricity. So you just got to get back to nature kind of thing. But I can't think of anything offhand.
So getting back to nature and kind of not having to worry about that kind of stuff, was that kind of a relief to just, I guess, be more primal and just kind of be there for the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, I've never been a big person to wear makeup and everything anyway, but it's nice you just kind of put a hat on and you're good for the day because, you got to keep that sun off your face. So yeah, that was easy. But yeah, that part, I mean, it takes me 15 minutes to get ready in the morning. So it's that part of me is pretty already, in gear for that. So
yeah. That makes it easy for you.
Yeah,
Did you
it might be, our experience, I loved it. I absolutely, like when we went to our camp and that, we were in a tent camp, and after being in Rick's elk camp, he makes me a comfortable camp because I like to be warm. It still doesn't have a bathroom. It didn't have an attached floor. So for me, Masimba camp was a step up.
Luxury.
I mean, it was cushy. We had all these people. I actually was able to have a shower. it was just amazing. So from my perspective, I was living in a really cushy world. Now, somebody else who's used to 5-star hotels or used to all those luxuries might go there and not like the experience I had. But for me, it was a huge step up. I mean, I was like, ooh, no mice, because our tent had like zipped. So no mice and snakes could get in the tent. So that made me really happy because, I was scared to death of black mambas. That was my thing throughout the book. But yeah, so I think everybody's just different, their comfort zone.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And I do know that there are some other more high-end camps that even more, because that sounded luxurious to me also, coming from like outfitter canvas tents that you've dirt floor and, we'll throw a tarp on the ground and so you don't have to stand on the dirt, that kind of stuff. But I know there are some other camps that are more luxurious. And so if anybody's listening and you are like, oh my gosh, like can't do it, there are other places. They just cost more money.
There are so many. It just depends what you're looking for. Rick was looking for the as traditional old-timey hunt as possible, but there are plenty of lodges that have the cushy parts of what you need, for women and stuff. So yeah, there's every option out there. So don't let our accommodations scare you by any means.
So when you went on your next trips out there, did you have similar camps? Was it similar experience?
No, each one is so different. Each one is so different. And that's why each time we go, you have new questions to ask. Like our second camp, it was more of a little cabin. It wasn't like a tent, and it was really quiet at night there because they didn't have lions and spotted hyenas. So the nights were quiet. So that was really weird for me. I'm like, where's all my night sounds? So
no symphony.
Yeah, but at the same time, the hunt was still amazing because Rick was hunting Cape buffalo and it was really thick. And that's another thing, we have this concept of Africa as being this big, wide open plains, open savannas. Lots of Africa is really thick. So where we were at on Waterberg Plateau, it was scary. We were literally 20 yards from Cape buffalo. And I don't know if you know anything about Cape buffalo, but they're deadly. And anyway, they're very scary. So it was terrifying being in there so close, and like one time we had a whole herd of females and young, like looking at me like within 15 yards. And I mean, we were just like you're going to wait and see how she's going to react. Luckily, she went the other way. But
thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so even though it was different, it was a whole new kind of hunting, a whole new kind of experience, whole new terrain, very sandy there. We saw a lot of rhinos, which was really cool, scary and cool because there were a lot of black rhinos there too, and they're very aggressive, and we were often right in their tracks. So it was just nice knowing that there was rhinos there, but at the same time, it added that other element of danger to it, but so anyway, yeah. So and then Mozambique was even, Rick went croc hunting there. And so that's the first time we were really around more kids. And that just tugged at my heart. I mean, we'd have just loads of kids walking. We had about a mile walk to where we parked the vehicle to the river, to the Zambezi, and the kids would just follow us. Then they'd be waiting on shore for us to get back in the afternoons. I think we counted 167 people waiting for us, like on the third day. Each day it kept growing, and they had never seen their pictures. So like we would take a picture and show it to them, or a little video, and they would just laugh, and they just melted my heart. I just fell in love with them. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And
so
Rick,
have you been able to get some really good photos and videos that you've been sharing?
I do the best I can, because I'll be honest, I just take my iPhone, because carrying a big camera around when you're hunting does not work. First of all, you're moving quickly, you can't make any noise. And I don't want that big heavy piece of equipment on me and catching on branches and stuff. So I usually just have my cell phone, but I've done pretty good with that. And when you're hunting, you can't sit there for 3 hours waiting for the perfect shot. So you just got to grab it as you're hunting. But I think I do pretty good at documenting the whole hunt. I try to post that as we go and explain everybody what's happening. And I think I made the poor croc hunt last 2 months on social media before Rick got his croc. I mean, that's how I was able to draw it out, every little thing. People were probably by then, no, did he ever get that darn croc? But anyway, so
talking about social media, you've been coming out of the closet a lot. Are you done with that yet, or are you still working on the closet?
Well, I'm mostly out of the closet. I'm editing now. So I've got the narration part of the book done. And I did hire a girl from Namibia to help me with the editing process, because I'm trying to keep all the money in Africa. But it's still hard because I still have to re-listen. And even though it's your book, you still screw up. Or I still screwed up, put it that way. Or you don't pronounce something just right, or a nest gets dropped off. So anyway, yeah, I still have to go back into the closet sometimes to fix my mistakes, but I think I'm pretty good. I'm getting close. I had to take a break because we went to Ireland, but I think I'll have about another week, and then hopefully we can send it off to Amazon to get approval, and then it'll be a couple more weeks, and then I'll have it on audiobook. So.
Cool. Yeah, I've been kind of keeping an eye out for that. I haven't been on social media a whole bunch lately because I've been traveling, and I have a hard time balancing all the things. So it's like sometimes I'm great and I'm there, and sometimes I'm not, but I haven't seen the TikToks is what I had seen, and I haven't seen them in a while. But also I don't like to get stuck on TikTok.
Yeah, I tried it. I go through spells. I do really good with social media, and then I don't, because it's very time consuming, all these different things. And I especially kind of feel guilty because sometimes I post, but I don't have the time to go look at everybody else's, because
Right.
I feel like if I'm posting, I should be looking at yours and looking at everybody else's, but I don't feel I'm giving back as much as I should sometimes, but I'm just doing the best I can right now. But I will let you know when the audiobook's ready.
Yeah, let me know, because I'll also try to start sharing that as recommendations. There was one congresswoman that I gave her your book, and she's like, look at me like, I don't have time to read this. And I was like, oh, I can't wait till the audiobook's done. So I can be like, well, while you're driving, you can listen to this.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because that's what a lot of people do anymore. And what's really going to be cool is I don't overwhelm it, but I actually have the sounds of the lions and the hippos and everything in the book or in the audio. So like when I'm hearing those for the first time, you're also so it'll be fun. Like, as I hear the lions for the first time, people will also hear them for the first time. So it'll just kind of, because lions sound so different than what we think of in the movies, so I think it'll be fun for people to really hear that. And I try not to overwhelm it. Like, it's not every chapter or anything, but just a little touch here and there to make them feel like they're in Africa. And Lillian is going to read that open letter from the African people. Lillian is going to read that in the last chapter. So you'll get to hear Lillian's
That
voice.
kind of just gave me chills. I have to listen to the audiobook now too.
I'm so excited she's going to do that. So it'll be awesome.
That's super. Well, thank you for taking some time, especially after your long trip, to visit with me. And I hope to see you again, maybe at Poma. Are you going to Poma this year?
I can't go this year. My brother's getting married that week. So I can't make it this year, but I'm bummed because I want to keep that relationship going with everybody that I did last year. But hopefully I can go next year, or see people at other venues, I guess. But,
well, hopefully we'll figure someplace out. If not, I'll see you at SCI or one of the things. I'll find you somewhere.
Thank you for having me on. It was so fun talking with you. I really appreciate it. And finally, glad we got to do this.
Of course. And before I let you go, will you let everybody know where they can find you and your book?
Yes. Right now the book's available on Amazon. I'm hoping to go what they call wide soon, where you can get it anywhere, but I haven't got that quite far yet. And then the audiobook will be available hopefully in a month or so. And I'm also on social media. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook at SueTidwell.Writer. So you can keep up with, I always announce, you'll be seeing it if the audiobook's ready. So anyway, you can follow me on those places too. Find me.
Excellent. I also will include links to the book and to your social media sites so that people can follow you and see your updates of the progress and everything else. I'll put that in the show notes for everybody. And as I said, I do thank you for being on the podcast so that people can learn just a little bit more about conservation and about your book.
But thank you so much. And one more thing, I do have a website, SueTidwell.com. And if you
Yes.
want a signed copy, if you're one of those people who like a signed copy of the book, you can order a book from there now too. So
Cool.
for other people. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. I had so much fun talking with you. Can't wait to see you again in person.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.